certain activities, and when we read the Mafter and the Navi, and when we Menachemolu and the Kaddish, Kedusha, all these things that we do, we have to have 10. And the mocker of all this is the Gemara Megillah in Bavli, Chaf Gimel on the days. Now, from a Pasuk, Israel, God should be sanctified in the midst of the children of Israel. Kol Dover B'Shpid involves holy activity must not be done less than 10. And we learn out from Gzeira Shalom, a comparison of work of Tok in the midst of the Pasuk is Kedat Israel, and then it's by the Meraglims in Yidolu, Mitoko, Edo, Zeh, and there it excludes, of course, and the Yeshua Minun, so there was 10 there. So we learn out from here the Mocker for all the things. I ran across a Yerushalmi in the Gemara Shvis, period 4th chapter. We don't have a Yerushalmi here. We do? Coming up in the world? That's the only one we got. And it tells us that Kiddush Hashem is only by the Jewish people, not by Goyim. The mitzvah, Kiddush Hashem, only applies if a person does the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach, that if he is a Goy, that he earns a chiluk of Olam Haba, because there's no question about it that this is an individual that earns a portion of the world to come.
Collectively.
But collectively, it is not, here, it says here, are they commanded on Kiddush Hashem? Specifically, like that.
The Jews.
Yeah, now we have here, Baruch Hashem, some kind of idea here. That's a very good question. Kaddish Shem Hashem Rabbi. The obligation to collectively sanctify God's name rests only upon the Jewish people. It rests on all the Jewish people, and this is a collective mitzvah, if you will. For instance, we cannot perform these mitzvahs unless we have 10 Jews that are bar mitzvah. You can't say this particular mitzvah of saying and Baalim and Kaddish, and Kaddish is a minhag, but Kedusha, all this you got to say in the presence of 10 Jews. So there is an extra mitzvah, collective mitzvah, if you will, that you require 9 Jews besides yourself in order to be able to fulfill this area. There are some mitzvahs that you need somebody else besides yourself to fulfill. For instance, the mitzvah of Puravu. Contemplate all he wants about Puravu. Smoke? I smell it. I have cancer. Anyway, this is the thing. Now, I'm looking for a portion to see if they got anything here on this particular point.
What is the fruitful and multiply? Having children. Be fruitful and multiply is Peru or Vu. That means having many children.
Oh, of course, one portion says to die al Shem Shemayim. If God forbid you have to die for martyrdom.
Does that mean you have to have 10 witnesses?
No, if it's something, it's a question of a parhesi. If it's a question of it's something that if there is a mitzvah that is public knowledge, or there's a vera that people want to go and publicly eliminate religion, the Jewish religion, you must have the obligation to take. There's a whole, it goes with arichas here, and this particular thing. Perhaps what I'll do is I'll study it. Perhaps next time I'll go and I'll do it as long as we have it. I know we have it available. I didn't have this available. I don't know. Discuss it the next session.
It means you take the obligation married to a person.
Where you put it?
Yeah, but
Required upon the male.
Yeah.
No, you just ask it a mitzvah.
Oh, you mean you try?
It doesn't mean to say that you fulfill any mitzvah in the Torah, but you got to try to do the mitzvahs. That's all. The mitzvah is always to try to do it. Obviously, not necessarily. The God understands sometimes a person may try to do a mitzvah and circumstances beyond his control stop him from doing it. Then again, so we have this catch-all thing that anytime a person wants to do a mitzvah and for some reason beyond his control, an honest they call it, an accident, something that he can't control, he can't do the mitzvah. If such a person has a chazaka, has a fixed type of activity that he's trying to do mitzvahs, and then God gives him credit though he did it.
All that explains why We hear of tzaddikim that were married, and after 10 years, they had no children with their wife.
Yes.
I never hear of them divorcing their wife in order to have children.
That's,
I never hear it, although I hear after 10 years that he has the right, or it's an option that he has.
We don't have not enforced it for a long time.
But the answer is that if a person tries and it just didn't, God didn't bless them with children, it's accounted as if he did.
But look, it was a long time in coming, their kids.
True.
And it's because God liked them.
They hear the tefillah of both the man and the woman.
It says there, the Rabbi has a taiva, the lotion more.
That's a passion.
A passion.
To hear.
See, I wouldn't use that language in relation to Yoram, but the Gemara says a desire. You hear the tefillah of tzaddikim. In this particular case, he wanted to provoke these great tzaddikim, our forefathers and foremothers, to pray to him. So God has many ways of making people pray. and when a person really is in a very desperate strait, he'll pray to God. You must understand, and they have different strengths in those days. And of course, even we have today, we have people that sometimes they're older, but they have younger wives or something of that nature that happens. For instance, the Chofetz Chaim got married a second time when he was in his 80s and he had children. But obviously, his mother, his second wife, must have been a childbearing age. And so we have that.
What if the person...
I don't know. It's possible. Ask Rabbi Berger. I think it's been brought up.
Yeah.
It's been asked. I don't know.
Well,
but I think it's been...
No. Well, the idea is, I understand it's very difficult. Let's go to the Hilchos Shuvah. We're on Vav Perik Beis. I'm going to read it as though it's written in English. Of course, it's not. That's on page 105. You have it? Afal Pi, even though Shuvah and crying out is good all the time. If a person is in very desperate straits, cry out to God. So the fact is that they're quiet all the time. On this 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, it's a especially auspicious occasion, and prayers are more readily acceptable at that time, because it says, if you seek the Lord, you will find Him. And when is this talking about? Well, it's talking about an individual. But when we're talking about the Jewish community as a whole, any time that they do tshuva and they cry out with a broken heart to God, they will be answered by God. It says, who is close to us like the Lord our God, every time we cry out to Him. Because God is very merciful and never turns His back, especially on the Jewish people when they are in a very desperate straits. Unfortunately, the Jewish people have been in desperate straits practically all the time. And even though I told you, remember about the Gemara in the Shoftim, where unfortunately after Yoshua and his kingdom passed away, they drifted further and further away from Avodah Shlema, Hashem, the perfect, complete service of God, and they were beginning to worship idols, and it was getting worse. And as a result, God began to go and send upon them enemies, Goyish enemies, and other calamities. And each time they cried out to God, and God sent some shofet to go and save them temporarily. And then they forgot their trouble, and they went back. A different generation. Every generation's got to be re-educated. It's a little tiring. And then eventually God sent a message through Pinchas, and He says, that's it. He says, you've been provoking me each time, and each time I've been forgiving, I've been saving you. I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm not going to do it anymore.
Loser had to go to work like Moshe Rabbeinu.
He says,
God is asking.
Yeah.
If He's telling somebody that, the person has to be in defense.
But the Jewish people started to cry out to God.
Yeah. Well, He told Pinchas ben Elazar He wasn't going to.
He wasn't going to.
But so Pinchas ben Elazar must have passed the word on to them. And the masses then.
They cried out to God.
All right, then. So who gets the credit for all of this? I wouldn't even say Pinchas ben Elazar, because really God Himself should get the credit, because he was the spark that touched off that they finally cried out.
There's got to come a time when you got to go and either be fish or cut bait, one of the two. You cannot go and vacillate all over the place and expect that the Rabbi Shem is going to help you when you're in Soros. And unfortunately, we have a history replete with all this type of activity, where the one generation doesn't learn from what the other generation went through. And they always make the assumptions that this has no relevance to me. And everybody does it. There's always the same kind of shtickler. And it's a little tiring after a while. We can't remember. What we can do is understand that the best way to do the will of God is to do it, and not to be on a constant yo-yo, up and down. We're making our own swords. You can't come to Rabbi after 20 years and say, how come we had swords? You didn't do the avodas hashlema that you should have. If we do what we're supposed to do, then lo and behold, the Rabbi does what he's supposed to do. He always does what he's supposed to do, but it becomes apparent to us. First of all, we got to work on the Jews that are very close to us. First, number one candidate is yourself. Hardest one to work on. With others, you can go and have maybe a hashpah, some influence.
Yes.
But with yourself, that's a tough nut. That is a tough nut. Because everything you're going to tell yourself, you already got a good answer why you can't do it. This is a very good thing. You should certainly learn a lot of Torah. You certainly should be a Yerushalayim. Without question, you should have a Avos Hashem, Avos Torah. You should engage in Gemilas Chasodim at all times. No question about it. You should do everything that you should do. The ganze Torah is, we sell a lot of goods, but we don't show the merchandising that's being shown. We're not producing the merchandising. You want to sell it, you got to show what you're selling, what you're giving.
Oh, you mean we give lip
service, but we're loud on the protestation that we are trying our best, and we're very short on the performance. Now, nobody's to blame but ourselves. You can't go and say somebody else is to blame. Maybe it's the very bad situation we find ourselves in. And we are, of course, we have Baruch Hashem, we're in Golis, no question about it. We have Baruch Hashem. Rabbi never gypped any of us in the question of the Yitzhak. He gave us a big, giant-sized one, so we shouldn't feel that we were gypped and we didn't have real opportunity to make progression, because it says in the Gemara, the greater the person, the greater Yitzhak. And you have greater potential for power, it can go in one or two directions. If you can have more potential, that means you could be, if you wish, righteous type, because you have a big Yitzhak. Therefore, you have the potential to be a very great righteous type. But nobody can be righteous for you. All the speeches in the world not going to make you righteous. You're going to have to sit down and work in the trenches. Like the Mesilas Yesharim says, you're placed here in a raging battle, right in the middle of a battle. Not some place where you can rest and take it easy, and once in a while you put your toe into the water and see if it's good, and then you can go back for a while and contemplate whether I should go into the water or not. No way. The Rebbe throws us right in the middle of the battle, and we don't have just enemies in front of us, on the side and the back, and we got to be alert. We got to fight and chop away and try to go and make some kind of sanity out of all the ways in which the Yetzer Hara operates against us. But we can do it. God is very fair. He is not about to throw us to the wolves, in this case the Yetzer Hara. And we'll continue with this. Well, incidentally, we will continue with the thing about the ma'akfin, the thing that holds a thing back from doing tshuva, after my belief. Remind me, we'll continue with the Gemara. We were learning Gemara, and we will continue with that. But well, let's go now. Yom Kippurim, that's Zion. Yom Kippurim, it's a time for tshuva for every individual, and also for the Jewish community. And it is a fixed time when God is very desirous of forgiving and forgiving Jewish people. Since God wants to do this, we should cooperate a little bit. It's for our good, so why should we fight it? Therefore, every Jew is obligated to do tshuva and to say confession, vidui, and Yom Kippur. And the mitzvah is that you start before the day starts, actually, before you eat. We say the first vidui on the mitzvah before.
Yeah.
Because why? Because you might choke on your food before you can say confession, and if God forbid you had to die at that point, you had already confessed, and you're dying with tshuva. So God forbid that you should have to die at any time. Why you should live forever? But we are mortal, and we've got to take that into consideration. Even though you did say this confession before you ate, you have to repeat it again and say confession again on the night of Yom Kippur night. That's when you say after Kol Nidre. And then you say the Aris, and then you say it again. You say Vidu again, Shachrit, Musaf, and then you say it Mincha, and then you say Ne'iv. All the way through the whole Yom Kippur, you're saying Vidu. You're not content with saying it just once, you repeat it over and over again. You really mean it this time, understand? Because once, Nachnila, that's it. You had the decision is made. I mean, it's your last opportunity to do the job that has to be done for that year, yes? For water purposes. Obviously, no matter what the decree is, sometimes situations can arise that you can still avert decree, but it's much harder. And even though you say Vidu before you eat, you should, we'll repeat that later, let's say that. And the Shlich Tzibor in the middle, when do we say Vidu? The individual says it after his tefillah. That means after his Shemona Esrei says Vidu, when and the Shlich Tzibor says in the middle of the tefillah. In the middle of the fourth bracha, when we learn about the setup of the various brachas in the Shemona Esrei, well, I have some material on that.
I'm knitting my eyebrows. We say it after we said the whole 18 brachas. In Sim Shalom, it comes after.
Yeah.
Then you say.
Yeah, you say yeah.
Where do you come to say in the middle of the fourth bracha? It's really at the end of the 18 brachas that Vidu is said. The Chazan doesn't say it at all. In Mincha, Erev Yom Kippur.
We individually say it.
We individually, but not the Chazan by Mincha, Erev Yom Kippur.
Wait, we do. Everybody says it. I always say it.
The Chazan doesn't say it.
Doesn't
Really?
Doesn't he say it?
No. That's what I'm accustomed to.
Okay.
I'm not. I think even Ashkenazim they say Avinu by, but in the repetition of Shemona Esrei,
What?
Vidu is said.
We just learned it just now. It's a Gemara Megillah, Daf Gimel Amud Beis. It says in the Israel, I God should be sanctified among the Jewish people, and the people, Jewish people, and it says Toch in the midst of, and go away from the midst of this bad congregation, and
Which
Adolf,
refers to the 10 spies.
Yeah. You gotta have,
where did it start?
because the
Because God
Meraglim were
intimated
10,
it.
and they were called by God.
The 10 spies. You remember when the 12 spies went out?
They had a million too.
No, no. Only Avram argued that he got down to 10 people, not to destroy
Wasn't it
the
the
world.
time where they first called all the tribes together and they took one of each tribe, a leader, to meet, to have a meeting?
Yeah, so that was 12 then.
Huh?
There was more than 10 then.
That's what I could never understand. It'd be 12 then, wouldn't it?
Yes. And the Gemara learns it out. The Megillah.
They told me, or I got it wrong, it shows one from each tribe and
No, that
census,
purpose. That was a different purpose.
to meet and have a
They would
quorum.
meet. That would no, not necessarily. That would be for the purposes what they would meet for. They were the leaders of the tribes, whatever they had to do to go in coalition business. And for instance, for the Nachalo, when they would divide the
I could
inheritance.
say here, there's a din, a rule in there. Am I right to call it?
The same word is used in the pasuk, in the Hebrew sentence
One of the
that
methods.
refers to the 10
Remember we learned the 13.
spies. It was an evil congregation. So the word that's
You
used
mean
in
the
that
ones that
sentence
wanted to rebel?
refers to those 10 that rebelled. You remember they went to spy out
Yeah,
the
so
land of
we
Israel,
learned- we
and
learned
they
a
came
good
back and
report.
gave a bad report.
Those
So
10.
those 10 were bad guys.
This is
So
where-
that's an evil congregation.
But it's
And
called
the
a
word that's used there is also used here, which intimates that a congregation has to have 10 men. Not 12, but 10.
Let's go further.
The same word in Hebrew is used in two places.
In Chet, a confession that all Jews are accustomed to say says, Avanu, Hu Ikra Avidui. This is the most important part of the confession. We have sinned. We all have sinned. Confess to God.
The video, that's the saying of Al Sheikh.
No. Shanu Baganu, that you hit your chest before the Al-Khait. There's a little section before. No, you don't clap on Avinu Akenu. That comes still later. There's
The sins that you confessed about on one Yom Kippur, you should repeat and confess about it the second Yom Kippur afterwards.
and if you forgot.
Even though you're still remaining about tshuva, with that in relation to those sins, because a person always remembers, am I sinning? As always
It's
before
always
me at
before
all
me.
times, I'm always remembering with those things that I failed in the past. Now, a test. Tshuva and Yom Kippur only forgive for averas between man and God. For instance, if a person eats something that he shouldn't eat, or he has lived with a woman not in accordance with the Jewish law, and things of that nature. He sinned against God. But averas between man and his fellow man, for instance, he has in some way hurt his fellow, he's hit him, or he's cursed him, or he's
hurt his feelings,
something like that, turn the page. He cannot ever be forgiven by God until first he goes
directly
and
to
gives
them.
to his friend, to his fellow Jew, what he is obligated to return to him. And even though he's returned whatever money he's obligated to return to him, he has to pacify him, in addition to returning the money, and ask from him to forgive him.
What if you don't?
That's a difficulty. Then you have to go to a Rav and ask tshuva. Because sometimes you rob people, people rob people so universally that it's very difficult to remember all your victims. Well, probably the tshuva would be in the derech of where you give tzedakah barabim or some nature where corresponding to what you have done. Then you have to go and then you have to go and seek his bechila. And you got to remember that you well, let's say even if all he did was hurt the person's feeling with words, he has to pacify him and go to him until the guy forgives him.
What if the guy didn't
If
know
the
about
friend doesn't want, if the man does not want to forgive him, he has to keep persisting, coming and bringing 3 other people with him of his friends, and they should go and intercede for him that he should forgive him and ask from him. If he doesn't listen to the 3 friends too, then he should bring him a second time or a third time. But intercede. If he still doesn't want to forgive him, then he leaves him and he goes. And the one that doesn't forgive him is now the sinner.
The one who refuses to give a forgiveness, after 3 times he's been begged, he's stubborn, he becomes the sinner. He's got the avera now.
And if it turns out it's his Rabbi, he's learned Torah from the person, and he's hurt Torah feelings, he's got to go there even 1,000 times until there's no, it says 1,000.
Forgiveness.
Turn up a couple more minutes. All right, let's finish the pairing.
Oh, he asked the question, if a person goes to ask forgiveness from another man, and when he gets to the house, he finds out the man died. Now what is he?
He says, I have sinned against this man, and I'm asking you to forgive me. God will help. He's got to do what he's got to do.
He's got to take a minute. He'll have a dream and tell him that he forgave him.
None of this.
That's the way it
There was
works.
no other Rambam but him.
That's right. He's the only one. Prohibited for a person to be cruel, and he must, and so as not to be pacified. But he should be easy to be pacified, and he should be hard to anger. And at the time when a sinner is asking him to forgive him, he should forgive him with a complete
Readily,
heart,
quickly,
and with a complete and
with no bearing of a grudge.
If the guy has really done you a lot of damage, and has sinned against you a lot, he shouldn't have any nikoma against him, and he shouldn't even remember what the bad thing he did. And this is the way of the Jewish people should do. And this is the proper way. But the Goyim, unfortunately, that they are early lame, that means they have uncircumcised hearts. And they're not that way, but they go and they watch forever for a way to get the revenge.
Let's say a person forgives wholeheartedly anyone who comes to him, but he can't remember who hurt.
I always, every time to Shona, I forgive everybody in my mind. If anybody sinned against me, I forgive them.
Yes.
But does God forgive him?
If you can't remember someone you hurt, but you forgive everyone, but you're trying, we'll use your
I just have to be a better.
That's right.
I say it
That's the idea.
Well, you forgive everybody, and then you ask.
Like Gibonim were the one that pulled Yeshua into making a peace treaty with them, even though because they were not the type that forgive, or they're not pacified easy, and therefore Gibonim not really Jewish people because they're cruel.
Who?
A person that sins against his friend, here's what you say.
Here's what you're
his
asking.
friend dies before he can ask
Have a
the
chance.
He should bring 10 men. See, just what I said here, what the Rambam says. 10 men, and stand them by the grave, and he says to them, before them, I have sinned before God, the God of Israel, and against this man, and I did this thing against him. And if he was obligated to, in relation to money, he's got to return it to his those that inherit from him. He doesn't know who to give his inheritance. He should go and bring it before a bezdin and confess before the bezdin. They'll tell him what to do with it. That's
He says something bad about Hasidim, or he says something bad about Israeli. If somebody says something real bad, he goes, such and such.
From that time, one of the ways I would say that there is a definite penalty for. But there's no penalty for obviously for hating a Jew for nothing. But there's no penalty for loving a Jew for nothing.
It's a mitzvah.
Nothing.
You should be inclined to love
There's a get-together before Rosh Hashanah.
Oh boy.
Amen.
Oh boy.
But now, friend, let's start the new year right.
Oh
Well,
yeah. They should, but
I
they
mean,
don't.
they should, right? According to this, they should.
Write a letter to Menachem Begin and tell him that he wants the whole 120 members of the Knesset to ask apology of one another before Rosh Hashanah.
Listen, you have great Rabbi.
That would be a wonderful gesture towards
sure.
peace.
If they could put peace between themselves,
They would
have peace in their country. What's your question?
You can say Kaddish de Baruch with any minyan. We were learning about this.
Completely opposite tradition.
Well, that's all
If
right.
you said it with a minyan, you're putter from going to another minyan and saying it again.
No, you know, you could. I said
could.
that's the difference.
I learned that
you
you
have
don't
reshus.
have to.
You have reshus. You may.
Okay.
That doesn't mean you have these habits.
Yeah, you don't have to.
Nothing wrong with that. Especially, we were learning. I brought in about Pesach Mitzvot B'nai Israel. God should be sanctified. And I had run across in my study the other night Yerushalmi, in the 4th chapter in Perek Shvis, in Sifta Shvis, and they're just talking about a very thing, quoting this very pasuk that we use as a mocker in the Gemara Megillah Bavli, in Babylonian Talmud, on Chof Gimel Amud Beis in the Megillah, to tell us that anything except Kedusha you have to have in the presence of 10 Jews, male Jews. If you want to go and read the Sefer Torah of a Rabbi, or you want to go and Duchen, or you want to go and, or whatever you have to do, you do it with 10 people. Kedusha, Baruch Hu, whatever it is. And so it says here in the Gemara, in Yerushalmi, that how do we know?
Close the door.
How do we know that the only ones that are commanded, Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying God's name, are the Jewish people? Because this Kadashti was taught for the Israel, this pasuk. Goyim are not commanded on Kiddush Hashem. Kiddush Hashem means that, God forbid, if you have to die for sanctification of God's name. The thing is, and you're not supposed to say, what? Yes. Yeah, you can lock it. When you're ready to leave, just tell me and I'll lock it. Okay. All right, fine. When you tell me, you tell me. And I was looking between Mincha and Ma'ariv, a few minutes between there. We looking in the forest we have here. I don't know if it's a Rishon or Afon, but anyway, it's Tab Yad, the British Museum. And very beautiful, great London, of course, because of the Gemaras and everything. He quotes the example of the case of by Naaman. Naaman was a Goyish general that was afflicted with leprosy. If you remember the story, he went to the prophet Elisha. He addressed the king of Israel and he said, I want you to cure his king, I want you to cure my general from his leprosy. So Elisha he came there. I don't know if you remember the story. He comes to the Elisha, so he comes there, he says, he's bringing gifts there. Elisha says, I don't want your gifts. He said, what should I do? He said, I have to go all the way over here to go and dip in this. We got rivers better than the Yarden over in my place, and much better, clear waters and everything. Would I have to come all over here and everything? Unless it's in spring flood, it's not too much of a volume of water. So he was very reluctant to do it. So one of his aides said, well, he said, all right, so he did. And lo and behold, it was completely cured. He was dealing with a man of God. So he said, I will no longer worship idols. I will worship the God of Israel. I'm asking you to forgive me, because the king always leans on me when he goes into the idol temple to bow down to the idols. I have to support him when he goes down, but I don't mean to worship the idol. He didn't make a deal of okay. So from here is one riot. So it's goyim are not mitzuva on Jew is not permitted to do this, because a goy, especially if a goy is forced to do something of this nature, obviously in his position he would be forced to do it. Yeah. Support the king and everything like this. But a Jew cannot be in that kind of a position. This particular mitzvah, he's obligated to fulfill this particular mitzvah. He goes with great arichas here, and it's very beautiful. And perhaps if we have time, we can perhaps make a session of this just as a parish. But I want to stick to Shalom Yom Kippur. But it's very beautiful, and I can see from the quotations that Hashem usually is that way. And right now, let me see. What stops a Jew from learning? You remember I quoted
from learning or truth?
Both. Learning. Like this. First of all, we learned in the Hilchos Yoredea, in the first section of the Hilchos Yoredea, Siman Pei Aleph. Here. If you have but if you have no alternative, you can even use a Gentile wet nurse. But during the time the Gentile wet nurse feeds the baby, you must see to it that she does not eat any non-kosher food. If a baby is milk-fed, breastfed by such a wet nurse, it builds in it a bad nature that comes out later in life, and also stuffs up the heart. Is usually the seat of the intellect. That would be the seat of the intellect. In other words, it makes it difficult for it to think straight. So we have here a side effect of why we're not permitted to eat non-kosher food. It stuffs up our heart. In addition to that, just like eating stuff, we were learning a Gemara in Yuma. We didn't go too far into it, but the last session we did cover it a little. The brochim that we have in this year is that we fly around and cover many subjects, and hopefully we do justice to some of them, at least. But at least we are not mired in one inyan. If it's necessary, we can jump from the inyan, as long as we try to answer the shailas that are presently before us. I'm in the Gemara in Yuma, and in the Shas Gemara, that would be on Lamed Ches, Amud Beis. That's 38 on the second side. You have a page 76 on it. In the Gemara Yuma, first look up and see if it's Yuma. And then it's Lamed Ches. Lamed is 30 and Ches is 8. What it says on top, that is the first 3 words of this chapter. And if you want to know what chapter it is, it says Perik Shlishi, the 3rd chapter. And then if you go a little further, it says the Gemara, Yuma. So you have the whole thing right in front of you.
And I thought
No, they don't just print, everything is printed. You'll be amazed how wonderful the Shas is laid out. We have on the outer column Ayin Mishpat Ner Mitzvah, and you have there references to Poskim, the Rambam, the Balaturim, and the Shulchan Aruch, and it tells you the various halach as we come to it. If you have a little letter, a Hebrew letter, any place along there, you'll know that that's the psak halacha, that particular thing. And we have on the sides, of course, we have all the Masoras Hashas on the very inner column, inside the Rashi column. And Masoras Hashas tells all the places in the various Gemaras that you can find the same inyan, the same subject matter in other Gemaras. Sometimes the same subject matter is treated in 3 or 4 different Gemaras throughout Shas. And
who gets credit for putting all this in?
All Gedolim.
Who did it?
Everybody
Who did it? Somebody had to know.
The Torah Or, then we have Torah Or that gives all the quotations on all Tanakh. Wherever any pasuk is quoted, he tells you where you can find it. And then we have on the outer column here in the Shas Gemara, Rabbeinu was 2 generations before Rashi. Wait, Rabbeinu Hanani, well, let me see what we got here. We have it here, Rabbeinu Hanani. He's one of the rabbis of the Reef. And the Reef, in turn, there was Rabbeinu Nissim Gaon was also one of the rabbis of the Reef. The Reef is the Rav Alphus. And Rav Alphus in turn, Rav Alphus in turn was the rabbi of the Rimagash. Was a great Talmud Chacham. And the Rimagash's top student was the Rambam. And Rabbeinu Gershom sometimes in the Shas Gemara. Rabbeinu Hananu sometimes, and Rabbeinu Gershom on the very outer column. Rabbeinu Gershom is 2 generations before Rashi.
Okay.
All right, lock it up. You lock it up. I'll bring you Bli Nether next time. If I remember, we have a picture of Tamunas of these very great Gedolim. There, this one here. And you can see, and perhaps we can. There's a little. It has a little seeper, a little story about each one of them, about these great Gedolim. Obviously, we've been blessed. The Jewish people have been blessed throughout all these generations with tremendous Talmidei Chachamim, chesed from God, the kindness from God. That in all generations we have people that are learning His Torah, and it's very humbling to appreciate that is so. And we're never wanting this. With God's Torah, we can come to everything. You can come to a Chelik and Olam Haba. You can come to serve the Rabbeinu Shalom with the Rabbeinu Shlema with a complete service. You can even come to be a tremendous person. You can realize your potential. Now, the Gemara here is very beautiful, and all they are. But here, I just want to go over a little thing that I've gone over before, about 9 lines from the bottom. Philo, you have it?
Yes.
Oh, wait, where am I? Excuse me. Excuse me, maybe I'm like. Even for the sake of one righteous person, Olam Miskayim, the world can continue to exist. We had learned earlier in this Gemara, about 10 lines above there, Olam Nivra, a world can be created. We have, of course, you understand, we have a saying among Jewish people that on the merit of Lamed, Vav, and the Tzaddikim, on the merit of 36 great righteous types, each generation continues to exist. And here we have a mimer that tells us, even if we have one tzaddik, the world can continue to exist. Yes.
One tzaddik in each generation.
Obviously.
Continuously.
Because otherwise, after that one tzaddik's up, there would be no more reason for the world to exist.
But somewhere I've learned that the Mashiach exists in all generations, so that's the best tzaddik you could have.
Well, we had that. You remember what you quoted before? Remember what you quoted before there about in each generation there's a different. So we had that before. Well, look, I'll tell you what. We'll go back a little bit so we won't miss it.
A little higher.
Olam Nibra. You have that about 1/3 of the way up from the bottom. Rabbi says, even for the sake of one righteous person, Olam Nibra, the world could have been created for that purpose. For instance, we have Maimorim Chazal that said the world was created because God knew that Abraham Avinu would come on the scene. So Abraham Avinu was such a great person that for his schus alone, the world could have been created. If God forbid there was no other tzaddik like Abraham, still the world would have been created for that purpose. God saw the light, it was good. Here, Tov means tzaddik. Sometimes Tov means Torah. But here, tzaddik means Torah. Imru tzaddik, it's good. If anybody that, God forbid, causes him learning to be lost, and it could, God forbid, cause his children to be driven into Golos. Of course, that means if a person, you gotta keep on reviewing all the time, because never, the Torah is like an ocean. And no matter how much you learn, you got to.
Why should the children be punished if the father neglects in reviewing the Torah that he learned?
Because unfortunately, they are innocent, true. But the truth is, because he is not constantly learning, they are not taking an example from him, perhaps. This means you're driven from the place you are at to another place. Anytime a person is forced to go from one place to another place, this is an inconvenience. Sometimes it's that way, but usually before you get to that point that you can feel comfortable in a place, it takes a little living. Because you come to people, first of all, you leave a familiar surroundings, and you come among surroundings altogether strange. And then besides that, the people you don't know. They don't know you, you don't know them. And you're like a stranger. You are a stranger there. And as a result, it's very difficult. And one thing leads to another. If you forget the Torah of your God, God in turn will forget your children. In other words, you want me to protect your children?
Protecting them, yeah.
You want to protect your children? The best way to protect your children is to keep on learning Torah. You want to give them a bracha? The greatest bracha you can give them is become a ben Torah yourself. This is the great bracha. Rabbi Omar, Morino so we can do also. Of course, to the person that doesn't learn, of course, he goes and becomes smaller and smaller because he forgets his Torah. If you don't review it, you forget it. There's no secret to become a great Goan. It's 99% a lot of sweat. You hated knowledge. So therefore, I, God, despising you to be a servant to me.
Yeah.
It works both ways. Ain't tzaddik nif along. This is what you were saying.
One doesn't comes to replace.
It comes in there and sort of, like a relay team. When you have a relay team, you have to pass the baton from one to the other, and the runners.
One's
No,
an influence.
One comes on the scene and is operating before the tzaddik.
Sometimes not. But
Does that also mean what we just looked, that if a person wants to serve God, that,
obviously,
I mean, even,
it gives to every human being like a carte blanche, a blank check. You can write whatever you want to write. You can write anything you want to do in your life. You can become the greatest person that ever lived. Everyone has that potential. Or you can become indistinguishable. The choice is your own. Nobody's making that decision for you. Not the Rabbi Shlem, not anybody else. The only decision that's made that we have a bechira on is in that particular area, whether we're going to try to be a righteous type or not, God forbid. All the other decisions are not in our domain. We may have an illusion that we have other freedoms, but they're only an illusion. They're not emes.
so when you give an excuse that I have so many other decisions, how can I deal with it? You're not telling the truth.
You're not telling the truth, just rationalizing.
You're just ignoring what you have.
There's a Gemara that talks about the various. They're talking about the various poorest, and one was very wealthy. He owned many thousands, and whatever sacrifice is necessary to devote yourself to Torah and mitzvahs, that's what a person has to do. And obviously, if a person is not going to do it or is reluctant in doing it, obviously he's impeding his or her own progress in making that progression. Nobody's going to do it for them. This is one area in which you are strictly alone, in the sense that you yourself have to make the decision, you yourself have to make the effort. And everybody can rationalize his position from Heinz bis Morgen. But the sof dover is that you're writing it. My Rabbi Olav Sholem, Rabbi Chaim David Regensburg, always used to say one of the inyonim of Gehinnom, of hell, is that a person will be shown by the Rabbeinu Shalom what he could have become, and then will show in juxtaposition what he did become. And that is punishment. That is punishment. You could have become a Moshe Rabbeinu, and you became with you. Alvai, you become all greater than Moshe Rabbeinu. I'm not wishing it bad.
Is the reverse true for a reward, a person who got to be what they could have been, but they chose not to be?
It's possible. There's many ways in which you can go. A person can become aware of the fact. The sun sets, and the sun rises. What was your question again?
You may not have any real.
Please don't.
I've
never heard a question.
Could the opposite be true in Lord, that a person could be shown what they became and what, thank God, they didn't become?
Well,
or
obviously, you see, Baruch Hashem, when it happens, that happens. That has happened because of something that happened in Olam Hazeh. You see, the reason that you have to show a person what he could have become is because, unfortunately, he didn't understand, and Olam Hazeh, the urgency involved.
But if you realize,
but when you realize the urgency, then you're working on the right direction, and then you will become.
Oh, so there's no need for that.
There's no need for that type of activity. As we will learn here in this Gemara, we'll learn right here, there is a big difference between a bola tameh and a bola tayr. When a person comes to make himself unclean, he's given by God an opportunity to do so, because he has bechira, he has free choice. A person comes to make himself Torah, pure, by doing mitzvahs and Torah, he also has that choice. But in addition to that, the Rabbeinu Shalom
helps him. Bola Tome, Poskiplo. Bola Tire, the sign will also. God helps him. And this Gemara will say this, wait a minute, and here we'll say. So this is very important. God is desirous that we all go to Gan Eden, and that we should be tzaddikim gemurim, complete righteous types, and that He can shower upon us all the blessings that are available for such types. And since our Father in heaven wants it for us, why should we argue with it, even if we don't have the seichel, the understanding, to understand that this is good for us? Since our Father in heaven wants it for us, let's try to get it. It doesn't make sense that we should fight the Rabbeinu Shalom. He's not asking for us that we should go and destroy our future or do something that is derogatory to our well-being in this world and the world to come. Contrary-wise, He wants the very best for us. So above all other things, let's not frustrate our Father in heaven.
Yes, that's what I'm doing.
Well, the Gemara says in Yuma, in the last chapter, Rabbi Akiva says, happy are you, the Bnei Israel, whom are you coming to make yourself Torah, your Father in heaven. God is not a stranger. He's our Father. He's our parent. He loves us. How can you treat a loving parent in disrespect? If your parent wants you to do something, even if you don't have the seichel to understand that it's something that you should do, shouldn't you try to do it as best you can? I recall my father, Olav Shalom, my mother, Olav Shalom, were kind people, and they tried all their lives to try to train me to be a decent type. Whether they succeeded or not, I don't know. But they certainly tried awfully hard. And I remember many times they were telling me, when I was a little boy, do this and don't do that. And Baruch Hashem, most of the time I listened to them. I tried to do what they wanted me to do. When I became Bar Mitzvah, I decided I was going to try to be a good Jew. I still hope maybe the Rabbeinu Shematzliach I will be able to be a good Jew. You see, that decision I made at that tender age. I was going to try to be a good Jew. How far you go, that of course only God knows. But Baruch Hashem, we have built-in guarantees. All you have to do is try your best. And if you're not successful, God will give you reward as though you were successful, because it's against your will. What? Right.
Some mountain to do.
No. That's what He wants us to live. Now, just analyze it. You got to be meshuga not to want to do the Ratzon
I mean,
Hashem.
even if you're going to just do it for selfish purposes,
Whatever purpose you want to do it.
you would do.
The Rabbeinu Hashem is asking you to do things that are good for you. The Torah says we think we have a day, and we're going to go on Iber Paskin Devar Yolam. That's a mishigas. That's a craziness. That's a madness. How can you possibly have the seichel and the wisdom and the knowledge to lead a better life than the Rabbeinu Hashem's Torah tells you to live? It's impossible. By definition, it's impossible. We don't possess it. So anybody that unfortunately goes in this terminology is destroying himself. The Gemara says that. And this week's Sefer says, Ma'amovis, life and death. B'charta b'chaim, choose life. He tells you right away, choose it. I'm telling you what it is. This is life and this is death. I can't be more simple than that. You don't have to be a big time chacham to figure it out. Do it. You don't have to be a grace, a chacham to figure out, I have to learn a Blat Gemorim and out of the Teisvis and out of the Rishonim and out of the Achronim, and I have to learn Medigduk and I have to go through all these things. No, don't confuse yourself. You be as good a Jew as you can. You do as many mitzvahs as you can, as best you can. And you try to improve yourself. You lead that life all the way through, it'll work out. You won't be alone in the first place. God will be helping you all the way. And you will be blessed. Not only in Olam Haba, even in Olam Hazeh. It doesn't make sense that a person should fight this. It is the wonderment when I watch these types that unfortunately people are so light of from Torah and mitzvahs to reach Rachmanis. And he does. He has Rachmanis Siman those types. And they go from one gutter to another. They go from one difficulty to another difficulty, all self-imposed. Not because Rabbi Hashem wants them to have this. And then they come to her and they have complaints. How come God is causing this to me? God is causing this. You're causing it yourself.
Can I ask this? There are some rabbis that try to do one up on God, like they want to make their own halachas and they want to do their own thing. My question: why do they want to do it? Why do they want to influence other people? Why if they want to do it on their own, do it on their own? But why do they influence other people to go away from what God?
That we
Because
treated. That we
answer.
Oh, what's your question?
Because that happens to make them a little God themselves. In other words, they want to influence others to follow in their path. And as a result, if they get a following, now I am somebody. I've done something. Even though it's the wrong thing they've done, it's because they're looking for themselves. That's the way I see it.
That he was saying it's part of psychology, that if they have followers to do what they have chosen, then it shows that to themselves they've made the right choice.
Very good point. That it answers their conscience
It
that people are
rationalizes
following me,
importance.
it must be the right thing. It appeals to them.
If you recall, some months back, we learned the Rashi in Chukosai. They have the Chumash. We can go over the Rashi, regular Rashi. You must understand, one of the terrible things about an Avera is it spreads. Pirkei Avos we have. Pirkei Avos says Avera Gereres Avera. One sin drags another sin in its wake, and the same thing Gereres Mitzvah. One mitzvah drags another mitzvah in its wake. Therefore, not only does a person have to be concerned about the etzem, the actual thing that he is engaged in, whether he's going to do a mitzvah or an avera. On page 174 in Vayikra, that would be in the beginning of Chukosai, chapter 26, and the Posik Gimel, in the beginning of the Chukosai. This is very beautiful, and with your indulgence, I will repeat a portion of it because it is beautiful. Right in the beginning.
Right in the beginning. Here.
Beryl, read the Posik.
Telechu, Be'esu,
Finish them a little Ivri, please. Let's start it again.
Im,
Yeah.
Chokas,
All right. B'chukosai. I'll read it.
Ikosai,
Yeah.
Te
Telech, Be'es, Min, Mosai,
mitzvosai.
Mitzvosai.
True. You notice here, there's under the Shin and under the Mem, there are Shvoim.
Two of
Yeah,
them.
that makes
Now, when you have them in juxtaposition, one with the other, in the middle of a word, the first Shvo is a Shvo Nach, it means rest. And the second Shvo is a Shvo No, it travels. So you read it in syllable ways. Tish Maru. You never make a mistake. If you
They don't
read,
need, you mean they don't know
you don't need the line. Tish Maru. There's two syllables. We've got to review. I have to read Hebrew. It's schrecklich, honest. You know, this is what makes me feel bad. I know so little, it's ridiculous, and I'm teaching you. It's
Well,
unbelievable.
how do you think that we feel if we don't?
All right. All right, what does this mean? We got any big-time translators here?
Give me a.
You're a graduate of the academy. I'm a former member of the faculty of the academy. With my statutes, there's a chok and a mishpah. A chok is a type of a divine law that we don't necessarily understand the reasoning behind. For instance, shatnez, a garment of wool and linen, and woven into the same garment is not permitted to be worn by a Jew. It's a mitzvah in the Torah not to wear it. People may not know this, but it's a mitzvah. You're not permitted to
I've
wear
seen a sign in a lot of tailor shops.
shatnez. They remove the shatnez. Because there's a mitzvah in the Torah, you're not supposed to wear shatnez.
It says in black
Going
and white.
through, what's the reason?
We don't know.
We don't know. Nazir, eating the flesh of a pig. Only God said you're not supposed to do it.
I thought because they haven't got a split hook.
That's true.
No, absolutely not true. It says in Sof Kedoshim and Rashi quotes him that he says, don't say the reason I don't wear shatnez or I don't eat bosah chazir is because it's not good for me or it's not something like that. I can't stand it. No, as far as I'm concerned, I can do all those things. But what can I do? My Father in heaven has made a gezerah against it. You see, the whole concept is
to follow
that-
this.
Why can't I eat it?
But if a doctor told you it's unhealthy, that's a good reason.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
If your Father in heaven, the master and of the ruler, you got to have a better reason than God asking you to do it.
God makes a request of you. He tells you don't do it.
Mishpat is a type of law that we would understand. Roman human. I'll take it now. Read the Rashi and translate it.
Listen.
Please.
he didn't get the point here, and let me give it to him a different way. The President of the United States makes a law emphatic. You can't do this and this. That means all the governments, wait a minute, all the governments, all the policemen, everything, know that you can't do it, and the population is going to listen to them, and they're not going to do it, right? A few, the rebels will get thrown into jail.
They don't listen to the laws.
I'm trying to tell you, if a king makes a law, the subjects of the kingdom listen to what the king says. You didn't get the... Let me finish my point. If a ruler of a nation puts down a law for the inhabitants of the nation that they got to do this or not do that, everybody in the kingdom follows it. So when the king... Fine, good enough. But when the King of Kings puts down a law in the Torah that you don't eat chazer, he's the King of Kings. He knows, he created the world. He knows the reason and not the reason. So you're not going to follow the reasoning of the King of Kings?
Oh, we do follow the reasoning.
It shows that you accept his directive.
Yeah.
That's what, without question, that's what a chok is, that you observe a mitzvah that God says don't do this or do that, and you don't know the reason. You're accepting it because you're showing your belief and your faith in God by following his law, even though you don't know the reason. Now, if you gotta know a reason for everything that you do, you're not an Orthodox Jew. You're a conservative or reform. They say, oh, I'll do this because I understand it's a good reason. So do you want to be an Orthodox Jew or you want to be a conservative reform?
All right.
If you don't follow everything in the Torah, you're not an Orthodox Jew.
Every rule that's laid down by God, you follow.
Absolutely, without question.
What about
613 of them.
man's rules?
Who's the
We're not
man?
talking about man's rule. We're talking about God's rule.
Where is there a man's rule? There's no man's rule here.
What?
Now, you're going to say that when Rashi explains something, that's a man, and he explained it, and therefore we're following Rashi? That's wrong, because Rashi is saying what the oral Torah was. The oral Torah was given with the written Torah, and you got to take both of them. That's the Gemara.
Okay,
First guy never explained the difference between
First,
Gemara.
Oral was given by God, but
last year.
it wasn't revealed except through a person.
What's your question?
But there is a reason why.
You do not take more wives because they'll lead you astray. So he figured now that I'm aware of it, I'll go and keep from doing it. And then he found out that he was wrong. He's also a human being. And he took too many horses too. And then there was a story in Gemara in Brachas. It's talking about you're not supposed to go and be alone when you study by a candle because you might go and touch the candle on Shabbos. And he says, I know what the reason is. I'll do it. And then he was grabbing and he remembered, oi, Stucky right? In other words, a human being is a human being. We are subject to, regardless whether we're subject to periods of momentarily forgetfulness, and so therefore we've got to be very aware of the fact when our Chazal tell us that we've got to avoid certain things, we've got to avoid them. The Torah, whatever it is, the Torah is, and the Chazal tell us things to do, we've got to do them, not because this is our iskaimus. We have the obligation to do it. Not necessarily. No, the Midrashim that said the angels. No, there is a reason. It was not the same thing. You were not supposed to kill an animal to have the food. But if they had the meat available and the animal was already dead, then the Rishon could have eaten. As a matter of fact, no, baby, he did not have the heter to hunt meat at any time until the time of Noah. Slaughter an animal to eat its meat. Before that time, they had no such heter. They only eaten dead animal. But that's all right. Well, let's go back here. What
comes to my mind in connection? God must have had a purpose in telling you not to eat. The reason.
Well, I'm going to learn the
To
Gemara
see if you
now.
have faith in him. To see if you respect him. By listening to his commandment, even though you don't know the reason for it.
All right. Let's go here. You will go in my statutes. Res mitzvosai tishmeru. And you will watch my commandments. Right? And you will do them. Now it appears here a lot of extra words here. You should know that there's nothing extra in the Torah. If you should go in my statutes, and then it says, "Let's mitzvosai tishmeru," you should watch my commandments, you should do them, it seems like repetition.
Saying the same thing in a little different way. But
Right.
that's not the case.
All right, now look in Rashi. Yoko, you would think, Zekiyama mitzvahs, this refers to observing the commandments. Kishu Omer, when he says the second phrase, that's mitzvosai tish, you should watch my commandments. Harikim HaMitzvahs. That's referring to observing the mitzvahs. Omer, let's talk. What am I learning from the first phrase? It's written here. What am I referring to that first phrase? If you go with my statute, but first thing after you have to become a Yirei Shamayim. That's step number one. After you become a Yirei Shamayim, and you have the proper attitude, then the next step you must learn Torah. How much you learn Torah? Amolim, Amolim, the word amomo means to work hard. You're not permitted to learn Torah on a very light basis. It's got to once over lightly, once when the mood strikes you, when you feel like relaxing, or when you want to go and you got 5 minutes to spare, so you'll put it in and you'll be a good Jew. It's very nice. I'm not saying that's bad. It's very good. But if you want to make progression, if you want to get
to go to school,
true. But the first thing that you have to do is to discipline yourself. You will understand that the importance of Torah is such that the only one that gets it is the one that puts in the effort.
Yes.
All right, Baruch Hashem, I'm glad you agree.
Got that.
Amolim Torah. The first step, you must work hard in learning Torah. And then what? The next part, Rashi goes on to say, why should you be working hard to learn Torah? Havum amolim Torah. You must work hard in learning Torah. Al manas, in order Yishmor, to watch it, l'kayim, and to fulfill it. In other words, just learning Torah, although it's a mitzvah in the Torah, l'masim es benechem, you should learn Torah. It's a mitzvah, I say, the eraisa, it's a positive commandment in the Torah. That in and of itself, although it's a mitzvah, is not sufficient. Well, you must learn it hard in order to observe it and to fulfill it. In other words, it's not just an empty learning. It's a learning leading to practice. You must live Torah. You must live Torah. You must be a Torah Jew.
All right, that's what I wanted to ask you. There's many people, I don't know everything, and I don't know many people that in their young days. When they get out into the business world, they just forget about the Torah rules, and they go to the business rules, and they're good heads, and they're successful. The Torah rules.
And what success are you talking about?
Monetary.
Making money.
That's right. They make a lot of money. They get a lot of olam hazeh. And you know what happens to a person that gets a lot of olam hazeh?
He doesn't get a lot of olam hazeh.
Get your choice. Why is the world? Because the world is meshugin. And what is good and what is bad? Quotes Moshe Sefer right at the beginning. Chayyim, he says that he saw a vision, and I think he quotes there. He says that in the next world, what we consider good is bad, and what we consider small is big over there, and what was big here is small there. See, Moshe compare. It's altogether different than.
It hasn't changed a heck of a lot, and it don't change, and something's going to come along to change it because it can't continue to go on forever like it's
I agree with you.
They were riding a rocky road.
I agree with you.
I don't know what
right. You see, the trouble is, thanks God, God's running the world. Not only He created it,
but He hides Himself.
He's running the world. Listen, He's running the world, and whose side's going to win?
Naturally.
What kind of Meshugana wants to be on the losing side? You got to be a real Meshugana type.
People don't know what
such a person should be put away for his own protection, because he's certainly not rational. If you know ahead of time that God's going to win, well, you can get it.
Oh, sure.
I sit here for weeks.
You can become acquainted, you can do the mitzvahs even before you become any knowledgeable in the Torah. Before one day I was in the yeshiva. I was a Shomer Shabbos, a Shomer Mitzvahs. I was learning, I was davening 3 times a day. This before I even went to the yeshiva.
No one told him, except this you got to do and this you
What's
did.
unusual about it?
Don't
That's crazy not to be like that.
You say that, but there isn't many boys like that.
That's why I have one of the reasons I have this year. See, I don't give up. I don't give up. As a matter of fact, a matter of fact, when the odds are bigger, I get tougher.
Well,
like it
for
says
you,
there,
it's
there's
not.
and
For me, like-
Sufyan Test is the biggest. It's got 8
Sound,
sukkim on
119.
8 sukkim on every letter of the Hebrew alphabet. 8. So it says-
76.
So by ayin it says, Eis las Hashem eferut resecho. It is a time to do for God because they're destroying God's Torah. You see, when do you have to be counted? When everybody else is running away like rats from a sinking ship. And you stand and you be counted.
Why is
You
it
fight.
always-
Because, Baruch Hashem, unfortunately, we have few tzaddikim. And like you say, God's spreading them around. So we're in the Gemara here.
kinda
God's
silly.
spreading it out a little bit so we can get each other. But the thing is very beautiful. I was fortunate. I was born right after World War I. So in the year I was born, there was a great Gadol that passed away. So I'm trying to be a great Jew so that I can go and perhaps be in that chain. I think it was the Brisker Rav that passed away in 1990.
Brisker.
Yeah, the Brisker Rav, Rabbi Soloveitchik's grandfather.
The first
He was the greatest rabbi in the World War I, the top scholar at that time, the Brisker Rav. And the Brisker Rav was Soloveitchik, Chaim Soloveitchik. Anyway, he was a tremendous scholar. I remember my Rebbe, Rabbi Regensburg, was a young rabbi. He went over and talked to him Torah. So he had two things with him. One, the Rabbi Soloveitchik said, no, that won't hold up. The other thing, he agreed with him. So he came out saying. Then my other Rebbe, he was the Rosh Mesivta. When I went there, and I went at school, used to learn from his last year in the yeshiva before he went to Eretz Yisrael. When he went to Eretz Yisrael, he won Torah prizes for his book, Tzivas Chaim. He worked with Torah prizes. He was born all of them. So I met a gentleman about 5 years ago in Adash Yeshurim, davening with him, and he was telling me about my Rebbe, over Shalom, Rabbi Chaim Torah. And he told him once the Brisker Rav met him